always a challenge to speak about global water scarcity in Sweden. If you look at it for the last 15 months, it's either raining or snowing. Uh, and then talking about the climate change or the global warming when it's a minus 15 outside. But I will try my best. Uh, we all get into this discussions that the global population growth is taking place. That's why different natural resources, or particularly renewable resources, are being scarcer. But if you look at it, the last century, the global population has tripled, whereas the renewable water resources in use has been sixfold. So we have been using more water than before per person as such. But even if we're doing that, it's a billion people without clean drinking water. And I'm not talking about the clean drinking water we get in our taps in Stockholm. It's the clean drinking water, the basic clean drinking water, which is possible, available through even very modestly cleaning systems of the drinking water. There are 4 out of 10 people in the world that do not have adequate sanitation. And we lose every year one Norway. That's nothing. It's 5 million people we lose every year, from water-related diseases. But when you look at this figure, and we look at the sub-Saharan Africa, many people in the, particularly average water use in the sub-Saharan Africa is 10 liters per day, whereas we are using here 350 liters. Not the US, Canada, and the western part of Europe. It's a huge difference, the difference of water availability and water use in the different regions. As I was saying, there is physical and economic water scarcity. Physical water scarcity is increasing as well as economic water scarcity is increasing as well. There is an uneven water availability in the different regions. That's we all know. But there is, even if there is water available, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, in parts of Asia and Latin America, there is a disparity in economic growth, institutions, and technological strength of these countries or these societies to get the water to the people. At the same time, we have been increasing water demand from the different sectors, from urbanizations, from industrializations, you name it, and agricultural growth. Water pollution, which was a part of a problem in this part of the world some years back or some decades back, is now becoming a major issue in the south. They were before not talking about water pollution. So there's mostly discussion about the water quantity. But the water pollution is becoming a serious issue in the south. Not only the countries those who are rapidly developing or rapidly emerging, but the other countries also. How we have tried to meet this water scarcity situation? There is always this approach of increasing supply side. That is the mantra of years or the decades of water management. Construction of large dams and reservoirs. It started in the United States, moved to Europe, then moved to the big developing countries like China, India, Turkey. But now it's not anymore China, India, Turkey. Look at what is the largest dam probably will be built in Africa, in Ethiopia, Burma, Cambodia, Laos. These are all countries which you do not expect them to be figuring in the dam making industries or the dam making projects. They are now big way arriving. Exploitation of groundwater. We were discussing yesterday about the Saudi Arab. It's not only Saudi Arab, it's Libya. Did the same thing. It's exploiting the aquifer water, the water which is fossil water in Middle East, particularly in the Gaza and the West Bank. And they are not the usual only suspects. Look at California. It's also, we are all been exploiting the fossil water. And not only the fossil water, the alluvial groundwater. water has been exploited in many other countries. India is the number one culprit, and most of the extractions of groundwater taking place in India. The place which is supposed to be the breadbasket of India in the Green Revolution time, the things are absolutely horrendous. Desalination process. It's expensive. We are trying gradually to the desalinize. There are various ways we are trying to find that, but still it's too expensive. Recently, the Pacific Institute in California brought out a report of showing how much of resources more have been spent on this desalination process. But that's what, but that is not moving into the agricultural demand. It's only for the urban use. And water trade. Water trade, I'm not talking about only the bottled water industries. I mean, of course, we love to drink the French water in Sweden, which is absolute, there's no logic except looking good. But we also drink water from Fiji, and we are ready to pay. I don't know how does it taste better, but still we are ready to pay 3 times more than whatever the bottled water. But we're also the large-scale water trade taking place between the countries. The island countries are getting water from it. And there are different ways also we are exploring to get the water even the different northern part to the southern part. There is water is being transported from the Great Lake region to Shanghai. But there is water agreements between Malaysia and Singapore. There is a water agreement between China and mainland China and Hong Kong. There is a water agreement which has not been coming to operation between Turkey and Israel. So there are various, and also Pakistan and some Gulf countries. There are lots of strange agreements are still working out on that front. But this is the way we are trying to, look at the water scarcity situation or try to address the water scarcity situation. In this context, I need to bring your attention to the international rivers. But again, in Sweden, it's very difficult to talk about the importance of international rivers, but we know that there are 263, which is, it keeps changing, but I think now, for the last few years, there's 263 international the international major river systems, which covers more than 45% of Earth's land surface and supports more than 40% of global population. The figures itself shows the importance of these international rivers. It's almost all the countries which are not islands. They are sharing international rivers. 92% of the 50% of their territories in this basin. Means the water which they are using, they do not have the sole ownership of this water. And 21 countries receive more than 50, because they are downstream countries, they receive 50% of or plus of their surface fresh water supply from upstream countries. So they are absolutely dependent on their upstream neighbors' goodwill, if I say so. No magic formula. There is nothing at the international law level to say that this is the way you should share the water. And that raises the serious doubt that, the long way we have been dealing with this water issues, how long, or is it going to continue, or will it the sharing process will continue in future as well? I will give a quick look at this. Some of the countries which I've picked. Turkmenistan, I mean, it's maybe a small country. It's a country which we like to make jokes about the leaders, but that's 98% of its water coming. The big countries like Egypt, Hungary, Botswana, Uzbekistan, Netherlands, Cambodia, Syria, Congo, the 80% of plus of the water coming from the upstream neighbors. And so you could look at the water in security situation in that region, or particularly water insecurity of these countries. Just quickly give you a briefing, and please tell me when I'm running out of my time limit. Immediate post-Cold War period, when started discussing about this transboundary water, CIA brought out a list in the late 80s that 10 places in the world will face water wars. I mean, how far we should trust CIA, but I think there are also lots of researchers that are talking about that the looming water wars, because there will be water wars over the river. Then, in the late 90s, in a decade time, we changed from the water war to the water peace. It came up with this, with because of the two things. Of course, the World Bank took the lead of getting this into this water peace slogan. One is that in the 90s, we saw the agreements on the Jordan. Jordan is not exactly the river agreement, it's a part of the peace agreement. Mekong, 95, Ganges, 96, Nile, 99, Zambezi, somewhere in the mid-90s. And when these agreements were signed, we thought, oh, these rivers were supposed to go into the conflict, but they got into agreement. It's part. Now the countries will sign the agreement, so this is part of the water peace. Then historical data uh, suggests that there are more cooperative action over water than conflictive ones. But the data, when you look at, of course, the 1967 war in Arab and Israel, it's a partly contributes to water. But when you look at the water conflict data, those people, those who really say that because of this the conflict is taking place, I have serious doubt. Because the war doesn't take place because of one reason. The war might lead to war for immediate reason, but there are several reasons behind war taking place. And I think, dissecting the data for your own specific reason for the war is a challenge and is somehow to be, I myself like to question it. So when we went into this bandwagon that there is no, worries about the water war, it will be water peace, then we didn't question the quality of the agreements which were signed that time. Whether these agreements are the good agreements, these agreements are the peace enhancing effect, or they are keeping the conflict under wrap to, getting a time, it's taking a time bomb which will come up to a conflicting situation in the available opportunity. As I said, there is no magic formula. There is no international sharing formula. There is no international law to deal with it. After decades of negotiations, when this one UN Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational Uses of International Watercourse was adopted in the General Assembly in '97, it's a 103 in favor, 3 against, Turkey, China, Burundi, nobody knows why they did it, 27 abstentions. But this convention needs to be ratified by 35 countries just to be an international law. It has taken almost 15 years. Only 28 countries have ratified. And to be honest, they're not very important countries that those who have ratified this convention. 7 won't need it. Even if it gets ratified, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not. It's a basket full of Halloween candy. That's what they say. It has everything to make people happy about. That's why it got 103 in favor. It has Article 3, which talks about keeping the old agreement. It talks about Article 5 and Article 7. If you look at it, it's equitable use and not causing significant harm to the previous use. So this is we all happy about that we have an international law, but it was not going to solve the issue. Some lessons. No war yet. If we look at these statistics, that is, it has caused the sharing of these international rivers. They have caused tensions, but has not led to armed conflict. It is in the recent years. It's not in the since if you look at since the end of the Cold War, no war has taken place over the water issues. Agreements have worked, even between otherwise hostile nations. I mean, the agreements between, if it can work between India and Pakistan over Indus, so it can work in some other countries. So they have worked in even fighting 3 different wars. The Indus agreement has worked, and the other countries. I mean, look at the Sudan and Egypt. So the agreements have worked to a certain extent till now. There have been internal violent conflicts, water conflicts, which water scarcity has encouraged ethnic strife. We will talk about the Kaveri River in the afternoon, and then urban riots, which has been common in the Latin America, is common in the parts of Asia and Africa, and it has affected international stability. If you look at lots of studies have come out how it is affecting the economic development and others in the part of this south, and leading to the internal stability or leading to internal instability. Threat to development. Of course, we all know that water scarcity contributes to the challenges to the achieving human security, food supply, health, migration, etc. So So this is all. Um, the new kid in the block, that's a climate change. And that's this, uh, when this, when we're discussing about the conflict or the water war in the 90s, the climate change was not being properly brought into these discussions. It was more of the scarcity of water, lack of agreement, lack of international formula, and then the countries will go into it. Then the climate change, which has brought into these challenges, that's changes in precipitation pattern and snow melting. There will be the glacial lake outburst floods, more droughts. There will be change in the pattern of agricultural water withdrawal, which is the most consumptive water use in the world. Increased alteration of the river course because of the you know because of the high floods and the high drought period. Then because the rivers are usually considered as the boundary in many parts of the world. And then when it changes its course, it can be a big challenge. And then seawater intrusion of the place water system. So then we need to know exactly how much of water will flow, because it might salinity and will continue to get into these river systems. This will be a problem in a sense for the existing agreements, because destruction of hydro projects, high floods, and glacial lake outburst. And we'll have a problem in planning water development projects in future. And that has been the key of signing agreements. If you look at the previous agreements, that we all have come into agreements because we can exploit the water more. And if climate change brings this challenge of planning new water development projects on this water issue, on the water course systems, then how you will think of agreements coming in future. Then, as I said, the doubts about its suitability to act as an international boundary. So the existing water sharing arrangements may come under threat. The issue, if you look at the existing agreements, which have been signed particularly in the 90s and which raised into this big hope of water leading to cooperation, even if they have taken the scarcity or the flex of the water availability dropping, or the flex, what do you call this, changing in time period, the short time period has been taken into account. But the climate change brings the questions about the long-term availability, long-term flow of the water resources in the river system, and that's what has not been taken into account. It's a changing geopolitics. It's not only the climate change, the politics is changing in the different parts of the world. Existing agreements mostly favor hydrohegemons. Look at these agreements. All these agreements which I discussed, it's a favors those who have the power in the basin. But the political and economic changes taking place in and narrowing the power difference. Particularly if you look at Africa, most of the river basins are challenged by emergence of a new actor like China, which was not taken into account when we are discussing about the water agreements in the mid-90s. And the China has changed the whole dynamics of power politics and the availability of resources to the different actors in African basins. Not only African basins, but Africa is the one which we can see it very clearly that this has happened. And there is an expanding knowledge gap. We all think that we can solve here with the help of the technology, but we don't want to give the technology to the countries where it is needed. And that's what there is a huge technological gap taking place. How to address it, and we only want to give it on our own terms. Why will we be worried in Sweden? What's the problem? I mean, as I said, we have plenty of water. It's always raining. We have a problem with the water. And why will we be worried? If you look at it, I just put Norway, that we should feel happy, and the USA. The water withdrawal per capita, if you look at Sweden, has less compared to Norway and the US. But we are also using much less water on agriculture compared to Norway and the US. But otherwise, industrial and municipal water use is quite same. But what we use, and the water we use here is more what is used from the tap. It's much more than that. The water footprint, if you take into account in Sweden, every individual uses 37 bathtubs of water a day. food, for our clothes, for our industries, for our daily requirement is 37 bathtubs water, and though it's one of the lowest consumption in the water in the per capita, but half of it comes from outside. So we are for half of our water dependent on the outside world. Swedish population is dependent on land and water outside the country also. We all talk about the land grabbing by the new actors. But we are also, I'm not saying the land grabbing, but we have been using or we have been dependent on other countries' land for our own food security. If you look at the total agricultural land area for food consumption, what we consume in Sweden is 3.7 million hectares, but the total cultivated area is 2.7. So what we, big picture. The things to think about here is the global water scarcity, particularly the issues which are arising in the transboundary river basins directly affect Swedish economy and food security. So supporting this effective and cooperative water management in the south, not charity. That's what so many of us believe, tend to believe. It's a necessity for the future water and food security in this part of the world as well. And support needs to be substantial and lasting. It can only, it's not only financial and technological, but it has to be political. How to reach that goal? These are the things which we have been discussing this all the time. This is my last one. It's merging development and regional peace agendas in letter and spirit. And how to bring that, that's a big debate which is taking place in this country, but I think it is it's not knee-jerk reaction needed. It's somehow a comprehensive and fulsome plan is needed how to bring this development and regional peace when we are getting engaged in other parts of the world. Not the diplomats only approach, particularly when you're discussing or dealing with the water issues. You need to bring in, I mean, I'm not saying diplomats are not smart people, they're smart people. But you need to bring in the water professionals. So it's not water is not only water, water is lots of other things as we all know. So you need to bring into the professionals into this area. Engagement at the highest political level is necessary if you want to really deal on the water issues, because water issues are highly politicized in many parts of the world. Water is not water in Jordan River. Water is not water in the Nile River. Water is not water in the Ganges River. They are much more than that. So we need to realize that before getting into these river basins, getting into something. We need that. That's why the involvement at the highest political level to get into agreement rather than getting the water minister or water professionals to talk about it and making toast and going back and nothing happening. It's a global, regional, and local institutions, initiatives, and policies are needed. This has to be flexible and enforceable. But at the same time, we need to realize that the states are extremely important. We can't really look at the policies, create policies at the global level and regional level and the local level and try to ignore the state. State is still the main actor, particularly in this country. Unless you bring the state into playing the main role, or we try to, demonize or diminish the state's importance in this country, then that's what it's not going to solve the purpose. And we need to instill shared values involving civil society and private sector, but still state has to be kept, play the central role in this situation. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Ashok, for setting us off in the right direction here in the morning and outlining so many important issues for today's topic in such a short time. We have time for a few questions, so please raise your hand if you have a question for Ashok. We have a question here, and then we have one over there and here. Let's take them in the order of the mic. So we start with this gentleman over here. And please state your name.
Should I stand up or it's okay? Well, Munqidh Mahyar, I'm chairman of Friends of the Earth Middle East. It's a regional organization, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. Um, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the presentation, very well informed. Um, I do have a long list of notes that I wrote from your presentation, but to make it short and have other people to speak, I did not hear much of the management side for water because, from our experience in the Middle East, uh, a lot of water will go abused because of the high subsidization, and people think it's their right to reach that source of water, and if water there, it is to grab. Another very important aspect is the environment. Environment have almost nobody to speak for, and a river basin or a river bed cannot speak itself. So somebody needs to look after that river. And in a conflict area like the Middle East, where Israel and Jordan and Syria took most of the 98% of the river's water out, the riverbed stayed with absolutely 2% of the water, and 50% of the biodiversity is gone. Um, so, Yani, I would like to hear from you, management side, to try to reform our water sector rather than looking for new sources that will cost us a lot in energy and also financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take 3 questions and then Ashok can respond.
Good morning, Hussein Amiri, Colorado School of Mines. Thank you for a great presentation. I would like to, this is more of a comment, maybe that you can comment on my comment. I was particularly pleased to sort of hear Dr. Swain elaborate or to refer to or compare water peace and water war. We all like a happy story. Happy story is more about water peace and not about water war. So looming water wars is a frowned upon concept, has been a frowned upon concept in recent years. And what comes to mind as Dr. Swain was speaking, what came to mind as Dr. Swain was speaking was the serious support for the Kurdish rebels inside Turkey. Serious support for Kurdish rebels inside Turkey. It went on for 15 or maybe 20 years, costing thousands of lives. And that was, for all intents and purposes, a proxy war between Syria and Turkey regarding the Tigris and Euphrates water conflict. And I wonder if you can elaborate on that. That was essentially a proxy water war. But when you define water war as in narrow terms, in terms of, do you have, are the combatants in uniform? If they're not in uniform, then it's not a war. If not enough people are dying per month, then it's not a war. So if you define war narrowly enough, tightly enough, then hardly, you don't see too many wars out there. There are not very many conventional wars. I mean, if that's what you're looking for, conventional wars, then you're not going to find too many. And I know you're not quite there. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a researcher here at the Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm. I'd just like to pick up what you said on some of the motives for us in the north to work with cooperative water management in the south. You mentioned that it is not longer it's not a matter of charity. It's a matter of being a necessity, and that coming out of the very large water footprint that we actually exert on the rest of the global water resources. Now, would you say that then implicitly change the logic, change our motive for getting involved from being one of solidarity and just benevolent global development towards pure self-interest in order to protect our way of life?
I will start from yours. I think if you look at the policies which we have done in the recent years, our development aid policy, it is also has moved into self-interest, and there is nothing wrong with the self-interest, to find mutual interest of the countries where we are getting engaged. What I said, charity means we do not get engaged long term. We do not engage with the full heart. We do not engage in a sense that which we think it's a mutual interest for both of all the actors involved. And that's what is the problem. The problem is that we just cannot, get in and get out, throw some things, and then feel happy about it. Because it's in the globalized world, you can't just keep these places separate. You don't really see these problems out there and think that, okay, that will be fine. Because that's what I was trying to say, that we are connected with each other in various ways. And I was looking at the areas of mutual interest rather than self-interest. The issue of Tigris and Euphrates, I think you are absolutely right. That's what I have been having problems with this, the statistics of the data set which are used as a kind of measuring war. I mean, the situation in the Euphrates Tigris it doesn't have an agreement. Turkey has been engaged in the GAP projects, which are building more than 20 large dams in the Euphrates and Tigris River. Turkey has the money. Turkey didn't listen to the World Bank, went on like this. Then the country like Syria and Iraq. You talked about Syria, but nobody mentions about Iraq because Iraq has gone into, the time period is and now they're coming back to a certain extent to play an actor. And Turkey and Syria, they have signed the agreements also that Syria will not get into the Kurdish issues. That's why they signed on sharing agreements, I think in the 1980s somehow, if I'm not wrong. So, and there has been constant threat by both Syrians, Turkish, as well as Iraqi air force to attack each other's water projects. So, yes, there has not been a war, but the situation is more or less, it's a war-like situation among them in the different time period. And also, the CAP projects were being used, as some report says, or at least were being planned by Americans while they went into Iraq, that to open the gates of the dam, that it will flood the areas, between Euphrates and Tigris area in the Iraq, which will be taking out the Saddam's forces out because it will flood it. But of course, Turkey didn't really listen to that. So it's a lot, the scenarios which we look at the Euphrates Tigris, it's maybe absence of direct war as per the statistical analysis, but there has been a more than conflicting situations over there. Looking at the management side, of course, I said we have been looking at the supply side, and the management side, of course, that's the key of the issue, how you manage your water. But how to manage the water? Who are the actors to get engaged in? The way we have been dealing with the water issues, if you look at it, either we try to deal somehow creating an international guideline or moving into the total local level. Then whenever we have given the states the power to deal with the water management, they have dealt in the different ways. Though you are talking about not only the water situation, which the water is not reaching to the, or water is not flowing in the river systems in the Middle East. That's has been a major concern also in other river systems in the different parts of the world, except in the flood seasons. The water doesn't go into the, and there's an ecological issue, there is maintaining the natural flow, but also climate change will bring further problems, because many of the river systems, particularly the Himalayan river systems, are losing, if the glaciers melting taking place, particularly on the eastern side of the Himalayan basins, that those rivers which are the rivers, the flow was year long, it will not be there. It will be only seasonal rivers. So that will create a major challenges of how to deal with these issues. So management is the key, and the management is, but the thing is how to reach the management side, because if in the south we are much more concerned about our food security, the immediate or the food security is again a term which is we define it, or we use it for our own purposes in the different ways. But the recent agreement all over the Colorado River, Colorado River agreement, if you the last month they came into U.S. and Mexico, putting specific water amount for the ecological purposes. So you need to reach into a certain level of the trust and working relationship and development to get into this sort of um, allocating water for ecology, and that's where we are having issues in most part of the south.
Thank you very much, Ashok, for the presentation and answering the questions.